Nikon has joined the crowd, the jam-packed mirrorless camera arena, with the Z50. Their full-frame, mirrorless cameras may be tempting, but the question is, just how special is the Nikon Z50 in comparison to rival models, such as the Canon M50 and the Sony A6400? Let's investigate this camera in more detail to find out. Nikon is renowned for producing cameras that perform effortlessly and feel really good while offering a lot of value for the money. This long legacy is carried on by the Z50. It isn't flawless, and as one of Nikon's first-generation Z-mount mirrorless cameras, there may be a few minimal, rough patches in comparison to the more seasoned competition. But those who are either new to photography or upgrading their gear will find the Z50 to have far more positive attributes than negative ones. There's much to like and little to be disappointed with. Or is it the other way around? Let's explore the specifications, features, and performance of this camera. Its 20 megapixel sensor is around 4 to 6 megapixels lower than those of its rivals. I'm going to go into great detail regarding the low light features of this camera because that tiny difference really enhances this camera in low light settings, so stay tuned for that. In addition, it delivers photos in 14-bit RAW at 11 frames per second, which is precisely the same as the Sony A6400. Also, it outperforms the Canon M50 by 1 frame. This camera definitely delivers in that area. Now, the majority of buyers of this camera will probably shoot JPEGs, and you have to admit the JPEGs produced by this camera are excellent. It has beautiful colors as well as a bit of color flexibility. There's basically nothing on this camera that will prevent you from taking great images. The true distinction, though, can be seen in the video. Without a crop, this camera can shoot in 4K at up to 30 frames per second. However, this camera's 4K isn't as great as the one on the Sony A6400 or A6100. Although, if you're a hobbyist, you actually may not need 4K. All you need is full HD with beautiful colors, and this camera does the trick. It can produce 2 times slow motion at 60 frames per second and 5 times slow motion at 120 frames per second. If you enjoy slow motion, you have to get this camera. However, we do want to point out that this camera just has a flat profile. There are no log profiles or cinema profiles integrated into this camera, which is important to know if you're trying to do any major color grading with it. One issue that has to be brought up, and it's crucial for both photo and video users, is that this camera lacks any sort of in-body stabilization. Although there is digital stabilization, the lens truly has built-in stabilization or vibration reduction. Having said that, the M50 and A6400 presumably have the best features and specifications, with the Z50 falling somewhere in the middle. So, what makes this camera so unique then? Among the highlights is the 20 megapixel sensor's low light capabilities. Plus, this camera's noise is less apparent because it has less megapixels. In comparison to an M50 or the majority of other camera manufacturers, this camera performs significantly better in low light. The noise reduction on this camera is one of its major issues though. At high ISOs like 10,000, there's way too much noise reduction, and your image starts to look blurry. You must definitely disable all of the noise reduction on this camera. On the other hand, this camera somehow looks great in low light while in video mode. However, there's a lot of dancing grain in the shadows or blacks of the image, nearly as if there's some sort of static around. You might not notice a thing or care in the slightest if you're a hobbyist. Moving on, this camera's autofocus for taking photos is indeed incredibly good. Therefore, if you're primarily a photo shooter, this camera will most likely meet your expectations. With autofocus, you'll never really have any issues. The Z50 has a quick focus acquisition time in both good and low lighting conditions, and it is receptive in all focus modes. Both the pin and single point modes are quick and precise. You'll be happy with the outcome altogether, even if you switch to continuous focus and choose one of the broad or auto area focus modes. Now, things are completely different when it comes to video. The autofocus is not as quick or dependable. Okay, I know you may be thinking we're sounding a bit harsh, as though this camera is falling behind the competition. Well, the reality is that it actually is, in terms of functionality and specifications. However, we believe that the majority of you will eventually wind up purchasing or picking up this camera to utilize at some time, and the design is completely responsible for that. This camera is very simple to use and incredibly user-friendly. The menu system on the Nikon Z50 contributes to how simple the camera is to operate. The menus are properly set out, and you can use the touchscreen to move through them as well. It is currently mostly intended for hobbyists and casual shooters who merely wish to capture photos and videos for personal use. And you definitely don't want to spend time navigating a new camera's menu and settings. So what about design? This camera is a delight to carry in terms of physical design. The grip is very comfortable and firm. Now, as we've already said, the autofocus with video does have trouble tracking faces. This camera's physical ergonomics are excellent, and the buttons are placed exactly where they should be. The buttons feel great to touch and are actually very, very clicky. Wait, that sounds a bit strange. However, this is a joy to use, especially when it comes to simple operations, such as tapping buttons and its dials. And one of our favorite features of this camera is how easily you can switch between photo and video mode by simply turning a dial at the top. It's that simple. The camera's battery life is also a truly outstanding feature. Roughly 2.5 days of regular shooting will be covered by this battery. Additionally, it has a mic jack for external audio USB and HDMI ports when it comes to iOS. There are two things about this camera that we didn't find interesting. First, you actually have to insert the SD card through the bottom battery compartment. It would have been much more convenient to have the SD card go through the side. One aspect that this camera does more effectively than both the Sony cameras and the Canon cameras is that it provides you two dials to adjust the shutter speed and the aperture. Normally, you only have one dial and must find a sensible compromise to adjust the other. In your hands, this camera has the sense of an authentic DSLR. It has identical buttons and functionality where buttons ought to be. This will feel extremely similar to using a DSLR if you are accustomed to one. So, although this camera is quite simple to use, your ability to utilize it effectively will determine how well you're able to take photos and videos, as well as how much you enjoy using it. Featuring ideas like appropriate lighting, composition, and of course, your individuality. Overall, using the Nikon Z50 will be a pleasant experience. It's good, but not at all great. There's no wow factor despite the wonderful menus, excellent ergonomics, the lovely touchscreen, good autofocus performance, and surprisingly good battery life. Casual photographers will probably love using the camera, but vloggers will find the flip-down screen annoying. The Z50 does things nicely, but doesn't take anything to the next level, in spite of Nikon's best efforts to appeal to a wider audience. So how does this camera stack up against its rivals? At this pricing point, particularly when compared to the competition, simply put, there just isn't enough. Sure, the Z50 may be well known and adored by Nikon users, but the price tag is too much given its specifications and features, making it more of a hobbyist camera than anything more. Spending extra money even by $100 or $200 is just ridiculous. This camera is just too expensive for beginners, and it won't attract the same clientele that previously bought entry-level cameras. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a wonderful camera with good functionality and almost excellent ergonomics. It delivers good photographs, but it's nothing spectacular. It definitely falls short of the competition. Although it's a good, stable camera to purchase, you'd be foolish to choose it over other cameras that are full of advancements and innovation.